Because all we have is life. And how do we know? Because we're here. Right? You can touch your skin, which means we have something to do and something to be. And yesterday we had a glorious day. It was nice and cool. We met great people. And so this morning I want to welcome two people who are here just because I'm here. One is Fanny, a lady we met yesterday. And she said, what is this church about? I said, you got to come tomorrow and find out. So she's here. Thank you. And a friend of mine from Chicago who knew me before I was a minister. No telling secrets. And Dennis, I'm grateful that you're here. He's here visiting his son down in Melbourne, and so he winters here back and forth between Chicago. So Fanny has lots of imagination and things about what is this woman, who is this minister, and then Dennis knows the truth. Because we are people, right, having human experiences, but we're spiritual beings. And so sometimes life happens. And so yesterday, as we were all excited about selling all the many things that we had, life was happening around the world, wasn't it? And so when we got home, I was talking with Reverend Rose about, so my talk title is Always and in All Ways a Blessing. Because I believe that. I know it. I live it. I have lived it. Life has forced me to live it. And yet, shift was happening around the world in many, many places. And so we can name Paris or Beirut, 41 people 40 hours earlier, or Baghdad, or Orlando, right? Or Chicago, because life happens. So how do we take that as it's thrown in our face sometimes, right? We go to the doctor, we get a diagnosis, we learn of a friend who made their passing, whatever it is. You got a job, you didn't get a job. How do you handle it? Do you always and in all ways know that it's a blessing? Be honest. Right. So I can probably put my hand up this high. Because I know it, I don't always believe it. And one of the things that I saw recently in the Course of Miracles movie, the trailer, I didn't get to see the movie yet, it said, I know it, I just don't believe it. Isn't that true? We know things, and yet life happens, and then we're not living them. And so one of the scriptures that of course, as I was thinking about all that was happening and how do we see things as a blessing, Spirit, has its way with me. So I spent the night with a man called Walter Starkey, and this is his book. He's with God, so you can laugh. This is the book I spent the night with. It's all God. And so if we can see that and we have that shift inside of us, then as stuff happens to us, so we see with our eyes, really life changes. So one of the scriptures he uses is from Hebrews that we're all very familiar with. It's Hebrews 11, verse 1. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. Sounds good, doesn't it? It's like, okay, let me get some of that substance. Let me get some of that faith. Where do I get it? Right? Well, you don't go get it. It is us. And we just have to keep drawing it forth, calling it out so we can be it and see with it and live it. And from Isaiah, but they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint. So this morning, when I got up at O Dark 100, I thought, I've got to go to the beach. I've got to just get a different perspective on the day. I don't spend a lot of time reading the news, and yet what Reverend Rose and I were talking about is we still have to be aware of what's happening in the world. That's our job. That's what we have to know, how our consciousness is affecting the rest of the world. And so together we're holding the consciousness of knowing God is in the midst of every single city, every single situation, every single diagnosis, even when they're not what we want to hear. Doesn't mean God caused them. It means God is in the midst. And therefore then we are able to get up in the morning, and as the great poem that I've read to you all in the invitation, get up and feed the children in the morning. And so first we have to feed ourselves, don't we? So I got to the beach, and there were no eagles, but there certainly were enough. There was a party of pelicans. And I've never seen them. They're circling and circling and circling quite up high. So when I took it with my 4S camera, it looks like there's just dust on the lens. But they were just circling, and I didn't know. Why were they not coming down so I could get a really good shot, right? But they were all together, circling, circling, circling. And so what's happening? We don't know. 2 days ago when I walked to the beach, there had to have been more, I stopped counting at 50 jellyfish, and some of them were this big, just washed up on the shore. What's happening? I don't know. So I took a picture, I said a prayer, and and then thought, oh, I'm glad I wasn't in the water when that one came up, when they're so big, right? And then today, as I ended my walk down by the jetty, as the big Carnival Cruise Line ship was leaving, I thought, well, now that gives everybody a perspective, doesn't it? Because it's so big, you wonder how it's ever even going to get down that canal, yes? When it's just so big. And there was a shell, like the ones I've shared with you, still connected. One shell in my 2-mile walk. And it happened to be still connected. So I ask every day as I go to the beach, give me my message today. Let me know what I'm supposed to know. Let me see what I'm supposed to see. And so we are all connected. But then how do we deal with life? As I was talking with Rose last night, I said, well, everything's okay in Paris because my friend is okay. How selfish is that? Yes? I have a friend that we were committed to retiring at 50 and traveling the world. And she is. She didn't get her calling to serve God, and so here I am, and there she is. And so I didn't even know she was there because she lives in Italy. But when I saw that on Facebook that she was safe, and so I said to Reverend Rose, well, and Dawn's okay. And so we had to talk about that. So how do you go from here's this happening to, oh, she's okay, so then all is okay? It's not, is it? And yet it is. So how do we figure that out? So there's a story about a millennia ago when there was a man who had a powerful message, and the kings bowed down to him, and people couldn't comprehend or get their heads around who this guy was. And so they would come up and they would ask him, are you God? And he would say, no. What are you? Are you an angel? No. Well, what are you? In frustration. And he said, I am awake. His answer became the name, the story goes, by which the world has come to know about Buddha. Because the word awake is what Buddha means literally. And so that's why we, when the Fillmores were figuring out what unity was, and remember, it didn't start as a religion. It started as a prayer movement, which it still is, and now we have some churches. That's why there's time in meditation. That's why Reverend Rose took us there, to get apart from our thoughts. So Buddha is the story about understanding that we are always and in all ways in a place of blessing, no matter what our eyes may see, because we're awake. So how many of you are awake this morning? So if we can awaken ourselves and our thoughts and have a shift, it becomes okay then. Let me just ask you, would it be okay if you had love and peace and harmony and joy in your life? Anybody want some of that? Yeah? So if we can shift what our thoughts are, listening to the song that our thoughts are prayers, are we not grateful that every single thought we have has not become made manifest? Think about when you thought the worst thing about your brother or sister. Right? So we are grateful that there is a presence that's greater than us that knows, oh yeah, no, that's not really a prayer. Oh, and we're going to wait on this one, right? So we have to then, that's where the faith comes in, or the knowing that the blessing is us and manifests as us. And again, how do we do it? So Starkey says in his book that it's an art and a science to the practice of being presence and present. Because there's no separation. We're God here expressing, right? So we have to be the presence and we have to be present. It's a lot to be a Unity student, isn't it? It's not like, oh, I think I'm just going to go have fun today. Well, yeah, you're going to have fun, but you're going to be mindful of how you're doing it. And then the shift happens in the world, and the consciousness gets raised, and peace is felt. That's really the whole chemistry behind Unity. So we're awake physically, but are we awake spiritually? Are you willing to look at things that aren't what you like, aren't as what you might want, without the label of good or bad? Because it's really our perception, isn't it? So I love tuna fish on a hard roll, and Reverend Rose does not. Does that make tuna fish on a hard roll bad? No. It's just not, it doesn't feel good when she eats it like that. And I love it. So does that make me good? No. But we label it, don't we? We label things good and bad, right and wrong. And then we stay in those boxes. And that's what I know has caused Therese pain. And so as I let down the boxes, or at least expand the boxes, let's be real, because this is life. So as I expand those to understand, oh, wait, I need to have a shift, then peace can come until I have another one of those thoughts. So if we're awake, or we're aware, and then we become awake. So think about it. Sometimes we think, well, I'm not awake. That has to be somebody else. I can't be aware. That has to be somebody else. So who has ever been in charge of waking the family, getting the family up in the morning to go somewhere? So you set the alarm. 6 o'clock is when everybody needs to be up and ready to go, right? So you set the alarm for 5:55 and you open your eye. You're awake. Everyone else is still sleeping. But you're more awake than they are, right? Yes? Would everyone agree? So you get to go and rouse them all up. That's how simple it is. Unity is practical Christianity. Just be a little bit more awake than someone else, and the shift happens. Shift happens. You have to be careful how you hear that. But so then everyone's awake. Again, not really saying, it's not a competitive thing, I'm more awake than you. It's just I chose to be awake first, and now you are awake. It's that simple. When you look to change your mind so that you have an effect on the lives of those with whom you spend your days. Can you also know that whatever is going on, whatever the experience, God is there? So I invite you to have that shift and know that when the car battery doesn't start, or the flat tire happens, or the person in front of you has 20 items in the 10 line, right? Because we all experience that a lot. God's there. And who is God? It's the presence of us. It's not something outside of us. Born in the image and after the likeness, it's us expressing right in the midst of it all. So I want everyone to breathe. In through your nose and out through your mouth. That's how simple it can be. But it's not always, is it? So in his book, what he says is, it's great. I keep loving it. And I didn't realize, Rose, he had address this book to you, and he's with God now, but he was he's considered, like Joel Goldsmith, one of the mystics now. So isn't this great that Unity ministers are now being known as mystics? Yes. So what he says on page 80, and I wrote it in bigger print so I could read it, as long as we judge in terms of good and bad, we have to perform some pretty fancy mental footwork when we try to make what we see with our physical eyes conform to a belief that God or Spirit is loving. Yes? Because we know it, and then that we see something else. God or Spirit, he says, is indeed the only power because Spirit is the only cause. Just as the dark only exists in the absence of light, Starkey says, spirit can appear to be destructive or creative depending on how we judge appearances. And so this was the conversation that Reverend Rose and I were having. So all is well in Paris because Therese's friend Dawn is safe. That's not the reality. That was my reality. But then it gave me hope to think, okay, let's get Paris on our mind, or let's get these other cities on our mind, so then we can make a difference. And when we make this shift. So do we always know that love is the only presence? And that's really the hard work in unity, is to get that shift going in our mind. So he was talking in here about his teacher was Joel Goldsmith. And he said, Joe, so you tell me that sickness and poverty and such are not powers at a spiritual level. And Joel says, yes, Walter. And he says, all right, but to me, in this physicalness, they are powers. And Joel looks at him and says, precisely. And if you want to stay in that human being condition, under those laws, keep thinking that way. But you don't have to. And so Walter says at that moment is when he realized, if it is to be, it is up to me. Those 10 little words we learned in Sunday school. If I allow my spirit to be negative and destructive, that is the law I'm creating for myself. I do not have to be a victim of either ignorance or spirit, he says. I can wake up. It's my choice. And so you're probably thinking, what's the point, Reverend Therese? Each of us has a soul, right? Yes? We are a soul, we have a body. Let me be clear. We are a soul and we have a body. So I hope all of our interactions are when my soul says, let's have a good time. Let's have a great experience. Because what Mary Mann Morey says is it is about physics. It's not philosophy. And so stuff happens. How do we look at it? And then how do we live in it? And can we see that another soul's journey is going to be different than ours and looks different than ours? It is our choice to wake up, he says, to the higher truth that is really all God in every moment. Waking up to this truth is definitely an art. Because in our world ruled by 5 senses, right, it doesn't make any sense. And if someone tells you they have the answer, I invite you to run. So it's so funny because then he says, it doesn't make any sense. But when does art ever make sense? Think about your visit to an art museum and you're thinking, really? And someone paid for that? And someone got paid for that, right? Because that's the beauty of it. It never makes sense. And yet we are the ones called higher to sit in consciousness, to make a shift. And so the story goes on then that Buddha, another millennia later, becomes awake and awoken and alive, and his name is Siddhartha. How many know the story of Siddhartha? Fabulous. Because what he saw was poverty. When he got outside of his life of opulence, he saw sickness and poverty, and he thought, it's time. I'm going to make a difference. And that's what our 5th unity principle is about. That's what we did yesterday. We made a difference. We met new friends. I was told I look 47. I'm 57. Fanny is in forever in my gratitude journal, right? Because it's about perception, isn't it? It always is. And so when we're demonstrating the truth of what we know, knowing it's all God, then we don't take it personally. We ask what? What does this mean for my soul's journey? What does this mean that I'm supposed to know? What? So we get to be aware and awake and asking what? Always. And then he ends this, which is fabulous. So we become aware of something that needs to be changed. Right? We knew that the garage needed to be cleaned out. So Mo said, let's have a sale, right? And we all agreed. So something needed to be changed at the human level. And then we stood in it. We all brought things, or we attended yesterday, or we helped yesterday, right? And then we worked towards that truth. It's cleaner than it was, and it will be cleaned out even more. We don't get to wallow in, and think about the word wallow, in the condition of, oh, the garage is so full. What will we do? We took some action. So I used something lighter as an example, but think about something in your life where you're in it and you can't get out of it. Can you see that God is present? And so the one example I use is the one that you're most familiar with me, is my husband Tom dying. I don't know where the blessing is. I haven't had that aha moment yet. And I wouldn't be here because we would still probably be in Kansas City. That's one blessing, right? I wouldn't be able to have met Fanny yesterday because I wouldn't have been here. A second blessing. So this is how you count through them every day when you don't really understand. And you unpack them to see where is the blessing in there, as opposed to wallowing in, oh my God, my husband is dead. And up until we did the book together, The Tethered Soul, I was wallowing. And then I had my ahas of non-resistance, right? So what he says is, I think this is where we get into spiritual trouble. It's fairly easy to get mesmerized by the condition and want to stay there, rather than using the condition simply to identify what our work is. So the greatest shift that happened as I was spending my time with Walter last night, looking for what is a blessing, is that I no longer get to wallow in what I've lost, or what appears to Therese is a loss. I get to live on the foundation of what I had and what's going to come forth from that. And so what we know from songs that we have sung and one we're going to sing right now is that we are a blessing. Our hearts and our hands and our voices. So close your outer eyes if that's comfortable and listen to the words for a minute. And question in your mind if you're not comfortable with understanding that you are a blessing to the world.
You are the heart.
You are the heart.
You are the hands.
You are the hands.
You are the voice of spirit.
You are the voice of spirit.
And who you are and all you do.
Who you are and all you do
is
a blessing to the world. Breathe that in.
We are the heart.
Together as a community,
We are the hands.
we are a heart. We are the hands and we are the voice.
Spirit on earth. And who we are and all we do is a blessing to the world.
You are a blessing to the world. We are a blessing to the world.
I am the heart.
Claim this. I am.
I am the voice of spirit on earth. And who I am and all I do is a blessing to the world.
We're going to sing that again, the I am part, and we invite you to join in. Please.
I am the heart, I am the hands, I am the voice of spirit on earth, and who I am, and all I do is a blessing to the world.
This is the truth. We know it, and so we let it be. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Amen.